He stared blankly at the floor, replaying the words in his head. Your fiancé slapped the cleaning woman. Your mother. He stood up slowly, his chest tight, eyes darkening. He stormed out of the office. Outside, Mama Esther had picked up her mop and quietly resumed cleaning like nothing happened. But her eyes were wet. She was used to being overlooked. To being disrespected. People had done worse to her before Richard became rich. But this one cut deep. This one was from a woman who claimed to love her son. A woman who would soon carry her family name. Adesewa didn't notice the change in the atmosphere. She was too busy admiring the pillars of the mansion and taking selfies near the fountain. This will go on my Insta story, she said proudly, flipping her hair. But her moment of glory didn't last. A black SUV pulled into the courtyard at high speed and screeched to a stop. The driver barely parked before Richard jumped out. His face was like thunder. He didn't speak to anyone. He walked straight past Adesewa, who tried to hug him. Babe. You're back early. He didn't look at her. He walked to Mama Esther, who tried to hide her tears. Mummy, is it true? He asked, his voice trembling. The old woman nodded, wiping her face with her scarf. Richard's heart shattered. He turned slowly, eyes locked on Adesewa. You did this? He asked coldly. She blinked, confused. Babe, it's not what you think. That woman, she splashed dirty water on me. Look at my dress. That woman, he interrupted, his voice rising, is the reason I'm standing here. That woman is my mother. The silence was deadly. Adesewa's mouth opened, but no words came out. The ground beneath her felt like it shifted. I didn't know, she whispered. Exactly, Richard said, his voice sharp, filled with pain. You didn't care to know. You saw an old woman and decided she was beneath you. You judged her. You humiliated her. His eyes were red now, his fists clenched. This is the woman who starved to feed me. Who begged to keep me in school. Who worked 3 jobs to get me here. Adesewa's legs trembled. Her face drained of color. I'm sorry, she mumbled. But it was too late. Richard looked away, disgusted. You don't belong here, he said quietly. Leave. The words hit her harder than a slap. She tried to move closer, but he raised his hand. If you can't respect my mother, you can't be in my life. She stared at him, broken, but he had already turned away. He held his mother's shoulder gently, leading her back inside. And that was how Adesewa's dream of becoming a billionaire's wife ended, because she slapped the one woman who mattered most. Not knowing, she had slapped the very heart of the home she wanted to call hers. The sun began to fade behind the tall buildings surrounding the estate, casting long shadows across the marble tiles where Mama Esther had been slapped. But inside the mansion, silence now screamed louder than any slap ever could. Adesewa's heels clicked uncertainly as she stood at the entrance, frozen, watching the man she called Fiancé disappear into the house, his arm gently around his mother. For the first time in a long time, she was not sure of herself. Adesewa had never been told no. She was raised in a world where money opened every door and beauty commanded every room. Her father owned filling stations across the country. Her mother sold luxury fabrics to the wives of governors. From her teenage years, people praised her elegance. Teachers let her misbehave. Drivers waited hours just for her to choose which shoe to wear. That morning, she had spent 45 minutes deciding between 2 earrings. But now, standing there with her designer dress clinging to her skin and shame burning through her chest, none of it mattered. Inside the house, Richard gently guided Mama Esther to a chair in the private family lounge. Sit please, he said softly, kneeling beside her. She smiled faintly, still shaken but proud. My son, don't be angry, she said quietly, brushing a tear from her cheek. Maybe she didn't know who I was. Richard looked up, his eyes glassy. Mama, it's not about knowing. It's about character. A good woman doesn't need to know who you are before treating you with respect. Mama Esther's eyes softened. I've seen women like her before. They chase names, not hearts. But my son, remember what I always tell you, we don't return fire with fire. We rise above it. Richard sighed, holding her hand. I know, Mama. But it hurts. And it did hurt. Because Richard wasn't just some spoiled billionaire's son. No. He was a man carved from sacrifice and sweat. When he was only 7, he watched his mother walk for miles under the sun selling roasted plantain just to buy him pencils. In secondary school, while other boys carried lunchboxes, he carried a pocket Bible Mama Esther gave him, using faith to fight hunger. When his father died of sickness and no one helped, it was Mama Esther who begged on the streets for money to treat him. She never remarried. She focused only on Richard, molding him into a man no storm could break. Richard studied hard, kept away from street boys, and refused to let poverty define him. He got a scholarship to study abroad, graduated top of his class, and came back to Nigeria to build a tech company. The world now called him the Digital Lion. But to Mama Esther, he was still her little boy who once cried because he couldn't afford slippers. He owed her everything. Back outside, Adessawa's shame began to boil into panic. She paced back and forth, dialing Richard's number again. It rang twice, then went dead. She tried again. "Please pick up," she whispered, eyes darting around like the trees were judging her. The guards no longer smiled at her. Even the gardener who once waved now turned his back. She couldn't breathe. "This is all a mistake," she whispered. "If I just explain, he'll understand." But a small voice in her heart replied, "No. This wasn't a mistake. This is who you are when no one is watching." That voice scared her. Finally, the heavy door opened and the butler stepped out. He looked at her with a stiff expression. "Miss Adessawa," he said, "Mr. Richard says you can go home. He will speak with you later, if he decides to." The words hit harder than any insult. Tell him I'm sorry," she stammered. The butler only nodded, then slowly shut the door. Adessawa stood there for several seconds, staring at the door, as if willing it to open again. But it didn't. She turned slowly, walking back to her car. Each step heavier than the last. Inside the car, the silence was unbearable. Her driver didn't say a word. For the first time, she didn't order him to put on music or take a selfie for her followers. She just sat there. Still. Broken. She didn't even notice when the tears rolled down her cheeks. As the car moved out of the estate, Adessawa looked back once. The house was still there. Beautiful. Majestic. But now it felt like a kingdom she had no right to enter. Meanwhile, Richard sat beside his mother, still deep in thought. "Mama, why didn't you ever tell her who you were?" he asked. Mama Esther smiled faintly. "If a woman loves only your money and your mansion, then she will not love your mother in her wrapper. I needed to know the truth." Richard nodded slowly. "Now I do." That night, Adessawa sat in her bedroom, makeup smudged, dress tossed on the floor. Her mother entered, confused. "What's wrong? Why are you crying like a housemaid?" Adessawa looked up slowly and replied, "Mum, I think I've lost him." Her mother scoffed. "Because of what? That old cleaner woman? Please. Just buy her a new wrapper and go back tomorrow." But Adessawa shook her head. "No. That old woman is his mother." Silence filled the room. And in that silence, for the first time in her life, Adessawa felt what it meant to be truly humbled. Adessawa sat alone in her bedroom, the lights off, her reflection staring back at her from the dark mirror across the room. Her heart pounded slowly, not from anger this time, but from regret. Heavy, bitter regret. The kind that stays with you like a wound that refuses to close. She could still see the old woman's face, hear the crack of her own hand slapping her cheek. She had done many things before, looked down on many people, but this time, it felt different. It felt shameful. Downstairs, her mother paced the sitting room in silk pajamas and angry heels. "So that's it," she said, nearly shouting. "One small slap and the wedding is off? Is that family mad? If it were me, I would have fired that old woman immediately." But Adessawa didn't answer. She had nothing to say. For once, she wasn't defending herself. For once, her silence was not pride, it was guilt. Her father, Mr. Felix, sat with a tired look on his face, slowly sipping his tea. He was a calm man, quiet most times, but this time, even he sighed deeply. "This isn't about the slap," he said softly. "This is about who she became when no one was watching." The next morning, Adessawa didn't wear her usual high heels. She didn't wear makeup. She tied a simple scarf on her head, wore plain slippers, and picked a loose gown that didn't scream designer. For once, She didn't care about Instagram or being seen. She just wanted to be heard by the one person who had every right to ignore her, Mama Esther. She begged her driver to take her back to the estate. At the gate, the guard stared at her for a moment, confused by her new appearance. But one of them, recognizing her, hesitated before calling the mansion. This time, Richard answered. "She's at the gate," the guard said. "She's dressed different." There was silence. "Let her in," Richard said. As the gate slowly opened, Adessa's heart beat faster. She stepped out of the car and walked alone down the driveway. Her legs felt weak, but she forced herself forward. She knew what she had to do. She had made a mistake. A huge one. And now she had to fix it, not to get the wedding back, but because it was the right thing to do. She met Mama Esther sitting under a tree in the backyard, reading her Bible. The birds chirped quietly, and the morning breeze moved gently around them. Adessa paused, her voice stuck in her throat. Then she slowly knelt on the grass. "Mama, please," she said, eyes already watery. "I'm sorry." Mama Esther looked up slowly, surprised by the voice, even more by the sight. The same girl who once hissed and strutted with pride now knelt before her, face bare, voice shaking. "I didn't know you were his mother," Adessa continued. "But that's not the point. It doesn't matter who you are. No one deserves what I did to you. I was raised wrong. I was taught that money and looks are everything. That respect is for the powerful. But you taught me something different." Mama Esther watched her quietly. "You could have shouted. You could have slapped me back. But you didn't. You're strong, Mama. The kind of woman I wish I could become. Please forgive me. Not for Richard. For me." The silence was deep. A single bird flew past. Then, Mama Esther slowly stood and walked toward her. She didn't speak. Instead, she held Adessa's shoulders gently, lifting her from the ground. Her hands were rough from years of hard work, but her touch was soft. She looked into her eyes and finally spoke. "You're not beyond change, my daughter. Pride is loud, but humility is stronger. If you've learned something today, then maybe that slap was not the worst thing that happened. Maybe it was the beginning of something better." Adessa burst into tears. She hugged Mama Esther tightly. It was not the kind of hug you give a stranger. It was the kind that heals the soul. Mama Esther didn't resist. She hugged her back and patted her gently. "It's not too late to become the woman God created you to be." Unseen by both of them, Richard stood by the window, watching the moment unfold. His heart softened. He didn't know what he'd expected, but this was not the same Adessa he once knew. He stepped outside quietly and walked toward them. When Adessa saw him, she quickly wiped her eyes. "I know you don't have to forgive me," she said, trembling. "But I want you to know that I'm not the same woman who walked through your gate yesterday." Richard didn't speak immediately. He looked at his mother, then back at Adessa. "Do you know what my mother wore to my graduation?" he asked softly. Adessa shook her head. "One wrapper. One. She borrowed money to even get the transport fare to the university. And when they asked us to take a mother-son photo, she stood behind me with her cracked sandals and said, 'I'm fine here.' That woman behind me, she made me who I am." Adessa nodded, tears running again. "If you ever disrespect her again," Richard continued, "I won't even look back. I need a wife who knows that true beauty isn't in lashes or lace wigs. It's in how you treat people who can't offer you anything." Adessa stepped forward. "And I want to be that woman. Even if it takes time. Even if I have to learn from the beginning. I'll do it." Richard looked at her for a long moment. Then he reached out and held her hand. "Let's start from there," he said. Mama Esther smiled. The wind blew gently again. That day, Adessa didn't just find forgiveness. She found a mirror, and in it for the first time, she saw herself clearly. The long dining table was silent. It stretched like a river of polished mahogany, candles flickering in gold holders, bowls of steaming jollof rice and grilled tilapia placed neatly at the center. But no one touched the food yet. Not even Richard. Not even Mama Esther. Not even Adessa. She sat at the edge of her seat, her fingers laced tightly on her lap. Her hair was simply packed this time, her makeup barely there, her earrings small and modest. The sparkle of luxury was gone, but something softer, something human, had started to shine. Mama Esther finally broke the silence. "Adesewa," she said gently. "Please eat. This house doesn't hold grudges over food." Richard looked at his mother with quiet admiration. That was her strength. The ability to offer grace, even when deeply wounded. Adesewa reached for a spoon slowly, her hand still shaking a bit. She took a little rice, then paused. "Mama," she said, "can I serve you first?" Mama Esther looked surprised. Then she smiled. "Yes, my daughter. Thank you." And so for the first time, Adesewa served food not as a guest, but with the humility of someone trying to build trust again. She placed fish on Mama Esther's plate carefully, making sure the bones were removed. She passed water to Richard, not for show, but from a place of silent apology. They ate in silence for a while, but the silence wasn't awkward. It was reflective. Full of thoughts, memories, and quiet changes. When dinner was done, Mama Esther wiped her hands and leaned back. "Let me tell you a story," she said, her eyes soft but sharp. "When Richard was 14, he fell terribly sick. Typhoid and malaria. He nearly died. I had no money. No job. His school refused to help. I remember sitting outside the clinic, crying. I begged one woman selling roasted corn for help. She gave me 1,000 naira. That money saved his life." Adesewa swallowed hard. Richard looked down, the memory still fresh. "I didn't have wrapper to wear, so I borrowed from my neighbor. And yet," Mama Esther added, "people still mocked me. They said I was cursed. They said I was wasting my life on a boy who would never become anything." She paused. "But look at him now." Adesewa wiped her eyes quietly. "I don't tell you this to make you pity me," Mama Esther continued. "I tell you so you understand why respect matters. This house," she said, tapping the table lightly, "was not built with cement alone. It was built with tears, hunger, and the kind of faith only a mother can carry." Richard nodded slowly. "And if you're going to be part of this family," Mama Esther said, looking straight at Adesewa, "you must learn the value of people. Not their clothes. Not their cars. But their heart." Adesewa looked up. Her voice was low, but firm. "I want to learn, Mama. I want to be better. I know I've done wrong, but I don't want to stay that way." Richard smiled slightly. "That's all I needed to hear." But the evening wasn't over. Just as they stood to leave the table, a call came in. Richard looked at the phone and frowned. It was his aunt from the village, Auntie Remy. "Excuse me," he said, stepping outside to answer. "Mama," Adesewa said, once they were alone, "can I ask you something?" Mama Esther turned gently. "Of course. Why didn't you tell me who you were the first day I met you? You were so humble, too quiet." Mama Esther smiled. "Because character reveals itself when titles are not involved. I needed to see you with my own eyes, not just hear what Richard told me." Adesewa nodded. "And what did you see?" Mama Esther's smile faded slightly. "I saw pride. But now, I see someone willing to change. That means more to me than beauty." They both sat quietly, the night breeze flowing through the open windows. It felt peaceful. But outside, Richard's voice was rising. "What do you mean?" he said on the phone. "Is she all right?" He walked back inside quickly. His face was tight. "Mama," he said, "we need to travel tomorrow." "What happened?" she asked. "Auntie Remy fell and broke her leg. She's alone in the village." "Oh Lord," Mama Esther gasped. "We must go." Richard turned to Adesewa. "You don't have to come. The village isn't like here. No air conditioners. No Wi-Fi. It's hard." Adesewa looked at him, eyes steady. "I'll go." He blinked. "You will." She nodded. "I need to learn where you came from." Richard stared at her for a moment. And in that moment, something changed. This wasn't about a slap anymore. It wasn't about shame or pride. It was now about a woman trying to rebuild her place not just in a man's heart, but in a family's history. Tomorrow, they would travel. And the real test would begin. The road was long, dusty, and rough. Potholes danced under the tires like scattered landmines, making the car jerk every few minutes. Adesawa had never been on such a journey. The sun above was harsh, the air dry, and the trees seemed older, like they had watched generations come and go. But she said nothing. She sat quietly in the back seat with Mama Esther while Richard drove the SUV himself. No chauffeur. No tinted windows. Just them, their thoughts, and the silence between each bump on the road. It was the first time Adesawa wore canvas shoes. Her dress was long and simple. No heels. No lashes. No perfume cloud surrounding her. Even her phone remained in her bag, untouched. She was in a different world now. One that did not care about filters or status. Mama Esther broke the silence after a while. "You see that river?" She pointed as they drove past a narrow stream with women washing clothes and laughing. "That's where I used to fetch water before school." Adesawa turned, watching the women. "You walked all the way from home?" "Every single day," Mama Esther said. "And still made sure Richard got to school early. Some days I'd go with hunger in my stomach and hope in my heart." Adesawa swallowed hard. By the time they reached the village, the air had changed. It smelled of smoke from firewood, the sweetness of ripe mangoes, and the earthy scent of old rain. Chickens scattered across the dusty path as they drove in. Children ran barefoot, waving and laughing. People looked up from their small wooden shops to see who had arrived in such a clean, shining car. Auntie Remy's compound was small. Mud bricks, zinc roof, a wooden bench outside under a mango tree. There was no gate, no security, just an old charm tied to a stick at the corner. Richard parked, and Mama Esther jumped out quickly. "Auntie Remy," she called, rushing in. The old woman sat on a mat, her leg bandaged, a wrapper loosely tied around her chest. Her face brightened as soon as she saw them. "Esther," she shouted, laughing through the pain. "Ah, God bless you, oh." Richard hugged her tightly. "You didn't even call when it happened," he scolded gently. "I didn't want to bother you," she said. "You're a big man now." Adesawa stood back, unsure what to do. She had never met people this real, this raw. No pretense. No show. Just love, loud and honest. Mama Esther called her over. "Come greet your auntie." Adesawa walked slowly and knelt down. "Good afternoon, Ma," she said softly. Auntie Remy looked at her, smiled, then asked bluntly, "Is this the girl that slapped you?" The question hit like thunder. Adesawa's face turned red. Richard looked uncomfortable. Mama Esther waved her hand. "Ah, Auntie, leave that matter." But Adesawa didn't run. "Yes, Ma," she said, still kneeling. "And I'm deeply sorry. I was wrong. I have no excuse. But I've come to learn, and to serve." Auntie Remy laughed. "Good. Because this leg won't raise itself, oh. You go fetch water for me today." Adesawa smiled. "Yes, Ma." The rest of the afternoon was like a test. And Adesawa passed it without knowing. She helped sweep the compound. She fetched water in a big plastic container, tripping only once. She peeled cassava with other village women, who whispered and giggled at her soft hands and polished voice. She sat on the floor to eat umla and okro soup from a shared bowl, her fingers sticky but her face full of peace. Richard watched her from afar, amazed. This was not the same girl he had met at a luxury party in Lekki 2 years ago. That girl wore pride like perfume. This one wore humility like a crown. He didn't know when it happened. Maybe after the slap. Maybe after the silence. Or maybe this had always been inside her, buried under too many years of wrong training. That evening, as the stars blinked above and the night breeze danced through the trees, Richard and Adesawa sat outside under the mango tree. He handed her a piece of roasted corn. She smiled. "I've never eaten this like this before," she said. "You mean without pepper sauce and cold juice beside it?" he teased. She laughed, softly. "Yes." He looked at her, eyes serious. "You've changed." She turned to him. "I didn't know how broken I was until your mother showed me." He nodded. "And I didn't know how much I needed someone who respected where I came from." They sat in silence again, the stars above them, the village quiet and calm. "You know," she whispered, "the walls here have no paint, but they feel warmer than most of the mansions I've ever entered." Richard looked at her, heart full. In that moment, under a sky without filters, they didn't need gold, titles, or Instagram likes. They had something richer: truth. And sometimes, truth is what love needs to finally breathe. The engine of the SUV hummed softly as they drove back into the city. The red dust of the village still clung to the tires, and the scent of firewood still lingered on their clothes. Adessawa sat quietly beside Richard, her hands resting on her lap, her heart heavier than the small bag of yams they brought from Auntie Remy's compound. She looked out the window, watching the city's buildings grow taller, the streets busier, the noise louder. But inside her, something was different now. The noise couldn't touch her peace. The village had changed something in her. It had peeled off the layers of arrogance she had worn like armor, and in its place, it left a softness that humbled her deeply. Back at Richard's mansion, the air was crisp, the compound freshly swept, and the gardeners were back to trimming flowers like nothing ever happened. But everything had changed. Adessawa stepped out of the car, not with pride, not with the air of a future billionaire's wife, but with quiet respect. Mama Esther came out of the house to welcome them. She smiled when she saw Adessawa in her simple Ankara gown and flat slippers, holding a small bag of fresh okra and ground crayfish. "You remembered my market list," Mama Esther said with a gentle laugh. "Yes, Mama," Adessawa replied. "And I got the exact type of pepper you said you like." Later that evening, something unexpected happened. Richard invited both women to the backyard, where a small table was set under the orange glow of hanging bulbs. There was no crowd, no music, no clinking wine glasses. Just the three of them and the scent of roasted chicken filling the air. "Mama," Richard began, his voice calm but steady, "there's something I want to do again, but this time with better eyes." Mama Esther looked at him curiously. Adessawa's eyes shifted to Richard's hands, and she froze when she saw him slowly bring out a small black box from his pocket. The box opened with a click, revealing a silver engagement ring, not the overly flashy type, but simple and graceful. Adessawa's breath caught in her throat. "You're doing this again," she whispered. "Yes," Richard said, kneeling down. "But not because you're perfect. Because you're willing to grow. That's more than most people ever do." Tears filled her eyes. She covered her mouth with one hand, trying to keep her emotions in. "Richard," she stammered, "I don't deserve this." "Maybe not yesterday," he replied. "But today, you've earned something deeper: respect." Mama Esther watched with tears in her eyes. This was not just an engagement. It was restoration. A full circle. From a slap to a ring. From shame to second chance. Richard slid the ring on Adessawa's finger. Her hands shook, but her heart stood strong. She held his hand tightly and whispered, "Thank you for not giving up on me." They hugged. Mama Esther joined them, placing her hands on both their backs. "God writes better love stories than we do," she said softly. "Let this be a lesson, not just to you, Adessawa, but to every woman watching your life. Beauty fades, but character builds a home." The next few days were quiet but meaningful. Adessawa took up volunteering at a local girls' shelter, where she taught young girls how to carry themselves with dignity and self-control. She told them the truth about her own journey. She didn't hide her mistakes. She wore them like scars that had healed. At home, she woke up early to help Mama Esther with cooking. She washed dishes. She sat with the staff and asked their names. One day, the gatekeeper smiled and said, "You're not the same madam that slapped Mama Esther." She laughed and replied, "No, I'm the new one." Wedding plans resumed, but this time with less noise and more purpose. Richard didn't hire a luxury wedding planner. Instead, he and Adessawa planned together. They chose a small garden venue, invited fewer people, and told their story in their wedding program, not the fairy tale but the truth. The slap was not erased. It was printed in words and shared as a warning and a testimony. On the wedding day, Mama Esther stood proud, dressed in her finest wrapper, glowing like the queen she truly was. As she walked into the hall, people stood and clapped, not for her outfit, but for her strength. Adessawa walked down the aisle, not like a princess, but like a woman reborn. When Richard took her hand, their eyes locked, and no one in that hall could deny the power of their journey. The pastor said, "Do you promise to love and honor each other, through wealth and through weakness?" They both said, yes, and meant it. After the ceremony, a young woman from the shelter walked up to Adessawa. "I heard what happened," she said. "You inspired me. I used to think change was impossible." Adesawa smiled and held her hand. It's hard. But it starts the moment you stop lying to yourself. And so, the story that began with a slap ended with a standing ovation. Because in a world full of pride and noise, the greatest transformation is not when a woman gains riches, but when she finds her humility. And Adesawa? She didn't just marry a billionaire. She married wisdom, character, and a future that her past could no longer control. The wedding was over, but the real marriage had just begun. The honeymoon pictures were not splashed on social media. There were no hashtags or paid photographers trailing their every move. Richard and Adesawa flew quietly to Zanzibar, spent 7 days walking barefoot on the beach, talking about their childhood, fears, hopes, and dreams. There were no expensive outfits, just sun-kissed skin, the smell of salt water, and laughter that came from the heart. On their final night, they sat by the water, their feet soaked in wet sand. I used to think marriage was just about fancy rings and big weddings, Adesawa said, leaning her head on his shoulder. But now I know, it's about honesty. About kneeling in the dust when your heart is dirty, and rising clean. Richard kissed her forehead. I married you because you chose to grow. That's all I need. They returned home to a quiet welcome. Mama Esther had prepared egusi soup and pounded yam. As they sat around the table, it felt like family, real, bonded, honest. But life, as it always does, had other plans. 3 weeks later, the past came knocking. It arrived in the form of a visitor. A woman. Young, tall, and dressed like she was walking the runway. Her name was Vanessa. She showed up at Richard's office reception unannounced, lipstick bright, attitude louder. Tell Richard his past has come to say hello, she said to the stunned secretary. Richard had just stepped out of a meeting when he saw her sitting confidently in the waiting area. He stopped in his tracks. Vanessa. She stood up and walked towards him like nothing had happened. Miss me? She asked. Richard sighed. What are you doing here? Vanessa used to be Richard's ex-girlfriend, the one who left when his business crashed 5 years ago. She had mocked his dreams, called him a broke tech boy playing CEO. When he made it big, she tried to return, but he never answered her calls. Now she stood there, all polished and smiling. I just wanted to say congrats, she said. You finally made it. And your new wife? Interesting choice. Richard's brows rose. What do you mean by that? Vanessa chuckled. You always liked class, but now you settled for charity. How romantic. Richard's face hardened. Be careful what you say. Oh, relax, she said, waving her hand. I'm not here to fight. I just thought you should know. Some people are whispering. They say your wife is pretending. That her change is for show. Richard stepped closer. Vanessa, I don't know what game you're playing, but stay out of my marriage. Adesawa's past may not be clean, but her growth is real. And I trust her more than I ever trusted you. Vanessa smirked. We'll see. When he returned home that night, Adesawa was setting the table. She smiled when she saw him. How was work? He hesitated, then walked over and kissed her on the forehead. Tiring. But this makes it better. She served him his favorite meal and sat with him as they ate. But his mind was turning. Should he tell her about Vanessa? Would it cause unnecessary pain? After dinner, they sat on the couch, watching a Nollywood film. Richard reached for her hand. Babe, do you remember the version of yourself you used to be? She laughed softly. The one who thought slapping was a response? Yes. I try not to forget her. She keeps me grounded. He nodded slowly. And if people bring up that past again? Let them, she said. I'll remind them I'm not her anymore. The next day, Vanessa did something shocking. She posted a photo on Instagram of herself and Richard from 6 years ago, with the caption, Some men forget where they started. I was there when the dream was just paper and pen. Shame they don't remember. It caused small ripples online. Comments poured in. Some said Adesawa was just lucky. Others said she didn't deserve him. The gossip blogs picked it up fast. Adesawa saw the post when one of her friends forwarded it to her. At first, her heart dropped. The old her would have called Richard, shouted, stormed to Vanessa's house. But this time, she did something different. She turned off her phone and walked into the garden where Mama Esther was watering flowers. "Mama," she said, "can I sit with you?" Mama Esther looked at her calmly. "Yes, my daughter. Sit." After a moment of silence, Adesawa asked, "How do you keep your peace when the world throws stones at you?" Mama Esther smiled. "I don't catch the stones. I let them fall. If I pick them up, I'll carry weight that's not mine." Adesawa nodded slowly. Later that evening, Richard returned home and found her in the kitchen. "I saw the post," he said. "I'm sorry." "It's not your fault," she replied. "I know what we've built. Let them talk. Let them type. I'm not afraid of my past anymore. I'm afraid of forgetting who I'm becoming." He pulled her into a hug. "That's the woman I married." But Vanessa wasn't done yet. She had one more card to play, and it would shake the very foundation they thought was already healed. It started with a knock. Sharp. Sudden. Loud. Richard had just poured himself a glass of water when the housekeeper came rushing into the living room. "Oga Richard," she said, breathing fast. "There's one woman outside. She say she no go leave until she see madam." Richard frowned. "What woman?" "That same tall one with red lips. The one way come your office last time." Richard's heart sank. He rushed to the door. And there Vanessa stood. Bold. Uninvited. Dressed in a fitted red gown like she was arriving for a cocktail party, not dropping chaos. "Good evening, husband and wife," she said, smiling coldly. "Sorry for the surprise visit." Richard blocked the entrance. "Vanessa, this is our home. What do you want?" Adesawa, who had just stepped out from the hallway, stopped at the sound of the name. She saw the woman. The same woman from the Instagram post. She didn't speak. "Not yet." "Oh good," Vanessa said, "the lady of the house is here." She pulled out a brown envelope from her handbag and waved it in the air. "I came to deliver this. Just thought it would be better face to face. No secrets. No whispers." Richard's eyes narrowed. "What's in that?" Vanessa's smile deepened. "Truth." Without waiting for a response, she tossed the envelope at Adesawa's feet. "Read it. Then thank me." She turned and walked off with the pride of someone who had just dropped a bomb. The gates closed behind her, but her presence lingered like poison in the air. Richard bent and picked up the envelope. "Don't open it," he said quickly. "Whatever game she's playing, we don't need it." But Adesawa was already holding it. Her fingers trembled slightly as she unsealed it. Inside was a letter, and a photograph. She looked at the picture first. It was old. Faded. A hospital bed. A woman who looked like Vanessa holding a small baby. A young man in the corner, Richard. Her heart paused. "What is this?" she asked, voice thin. Richard grabbed the paper and read. The words stung. "Dear Richard, 6 years ago, I had a child. Your child. I never told you because I was angry you had nothing then. But now, he's old enough to start asking questions. And I'm tired of hiding him. His name is Ryan. And he's yours. Vanessa." The paper slipped from Richard's hand. Adesawa's legs felt weak. She backed away slowly, staring at her husband. "Is it true?" she asked. Richard's lips parted, but no words came. His thoughts were tumbling too fast. I didn't know." "Are you sure?" she asked again, this time her voice sharper. "You never knew?" "I swear to you," he said, walking closer. "I never knew she was pregnant. She left me. Blocked my number. Changed cities. I never even saw her again until last month." Adesawa picked up the photo again. The child was about 5. Brown skin. Curly hair. A sharp jawline. He looked familiar. Richard sat down, his head in his hands. "If it's true, if he's mine. I don't know what to do." Adesawa stood there, frozen between hurt and fear. This wasn't part of the story she agreed to. She had come to terms with her past, but now, it felt like Richard's past was about to steal her future. Mama Esther entered the room, sensing the heaviness. She picked up the envelope and read quickly. Her eyes filled with tears. "Richard, why didn't she say anything all these years?" "I don't know, Mama," he whispered. She disappeared. Adesawa turned to Mama Esther. What do I do? She asked, voice shaking. How do I process this? I married a man I trusted with my soul. Now I might have a stepson I've never met. Mama Esther walked over and held her hand. My daughter, marriage is not only for days of roses. You will face thunder and lightning. But the question is, do you face it together or run when the wind starts blowing? Adesawa looked at Richard. His eyes begged for understanding. I won't lie to you, she said slowly. This hurts. Deeply. Not because of the child, but because of the pain that will come with the drama. I understand, he said. And if you ask me to walk away, I won't fight you. She stepped closer. But I won't. Not yet. I need time. But I won't walk. The tension broke. Just slightly. Richard stood and held her. Thank you. But outside, Vanessa was already working on her next move. She wasn't done. The truth may have been delivered, but it wasn't complete. She had something else. Something darker. And she was ready to use it. The next morning came with silence heavier than thunder. Richard didn't sleep a wink. He sat on the edge of the bed all night, hands in his hair, replaying every moment he had with Vanessa in his mind, searching for signs, clues, anything that might prove or disprove her claim. Adesawa, though still heartbroken, had curled up on her side of the bed, her face to the wall, eyes open but empty. She wasn't crying. She was thinking. Deeply. About everything. About life, marriage, pain, and how fast joy can slip when the past kicks down your door. Mama Esther entered quietly with 2 cups of warm lemon tea. She looked at them, her children, now entangled in a storm neither of them caused. You need strength, she said softly, placing the cups down. And clarity. Richard looked up, face pale. Mama, what if it's true? What if I've had a son out there all this time and I didn't even know? Mama Esther sat beside him. Then you own it. You accept the truth and you make it right. But you also protect your wife while doing it. He nodded slowly. And if the boy is mine, I'll take responsibility. But what if it's another trap? Just then, Richard's phone rang. Unknown number. He stared at it. Adesawa turned slowly to look at him. Pick it, she said. Let's hear what she wants now. He answered. Vanessa's voice came through sharp and confident. I figured you might doubt me. So I'm giving you an option. DNA test. No drama. No threats. Richard blinked. Really? Yes, she replied. Bring your fancy doctors or use mine. I'll bring Ryan. You'll see for yourself. Fine, Richard said. Send the location. 2 days later, they met at a private clinic in Ikoyi. Vanessa walked in, holding a small boy with curly hair and big brown eyes. He looked nervous, confused. Richard's heart sank. The boy did look like him. The same nose. The same ears. But he stayed calm. Adesawa stood beside him, arms folded, heart steady but guarded. She looked at the child, then at Vanessa. What do you want? She asked. Money? Fame? Vanessa laughed. Please. I have my own money. I just want what's mine, acknowledgement. And I want my son to know who his father is. The nurses took samples. Cheek swabs. Quick. Clean. Quiet. Vanessa whispered something into the child's ear and then left the room. The test would take 3 days. 3 very long days. When they returned home, Adesawa didn't speak. Richard tried to hold her hand, but she gently pulled away. Give me space, she said. Please. He nodded, hurt but understanding. Mama Esther prayed that night louder than usual. God, reveal what's true. And if there's more we can't see, show us before it swallows us. On the 3rd day, the results arrived. Positive. Richard was the father. He sat down slowly as the doctor handed him the file. Adesawa turned her face away. She wasn't shocked. Deep down, she already knew. The resemblance, the timing, it all added up. But hearing it confirmed sliced something inside her. I need air, she whispered and walked out. Richard followed her. Adesawa, he called. Talk to me. Please. She turned, her eyes wet but strong. I married you because you were the one person I thought had no secrets. But now, your past is my present. And it hurts. I know, he said, voice shaking. I didn't choose this. But I will fix it the best I can. Suddenly, Mama Esther rushed out holding her phone. Her eyes wide. You need to see this. She handed them the phone. It was a video. A blurry recording from a secret camera. Vanessa. Sitting in a bar. Laughing with a man. Don't worry, she said on camera. I'll make him believe it. The boy isn't even his. But once he accepts the child, the real fun begins. Richard's jaw dropped. What? Adesua grabbed the phone and played it again. The man in the video leaned in. So who's the real father? Vanessa sipped her drink. Some guy from Port Harcourt. He doesn't even know. But Richard will raise the child and I'll take a piece of his empire. Watch me. Richard stood frozen. His heart, once broken by guilt, now burned with rage. The trap was deeper than he thought. Adesua turned to him slowly. That test. Could she have faked it? Mama Esther nodded. She offered to use her own lab, remember? Richard clenched his fists. We're doing another one. A private one. With our own people. And this time, we take no chances. 2 days later, a second test was done. Different hospital. Different team. Vanessa was not told. She was sent a message that the boy needed a health checkup. She came. They collected another sample quietly. 3 days passed. And then, the truth arrived. Negative. The child was not his. Richard collapsed on the chair. Adesua stood still for several seconds. Then she let out a long breath that had been stuck in her chest for days. Mama Esther crossed herself. God never sleeps, she whispered. Richard stood and called Vanessa. She answered, sweetly. Hi, baby daddy. He didn't smile. You lied, he said coldly. The boy isn't mine. We have proof. There was silence. Then a laugh. A slow one. Well, she said, you found out faster than I expected. You used a child, he growled. You tried to destroy my marriage. And I would have succeeded, she replied. If your wife didn't have more backbone than I thought. He ended the call. Adesua walked to him and held his face. You don't owe me an apology. You owe yourself forgiveness. She hurt you before. But I'm here now. We fight together. Richard nodded, tears in his eyes. And so, a lie was crushed. A marriage was tested. But love, real love, refused to bow. 3 months passed. And with each one, the wounds left by betrayal slowly closed. The gossip blogs had moved on. The comments stopped. The hashtags faded. But what never faded was the strength Adesua and Richard found in one another. Their love was no longer about fairy tale perfection. It was about shared scars, chosen forgiveness, and rebuilding trust one honest day at a time. The air was calm that Sunday morning as sunlight streamed gently through the mansion windows. The aroma of fried plantains filled the kitchen while gospel music hummed low from the speaker. Mama Esther stood at the sink humming, while Adesua flipped pancakes in a soft pink wrapper, hair tied in a net, her face fresh and makeup-free. She looked nothing like the proud heiress who once slapped an old woman. She was now a wife, a friend, a woman humbled and healed. Richard entered the kitchen and wrapped his arms around her waist from behind. She smiled without turning. I added extra honey this time, she said. I know you like it that way. He kissed her cheek. I like it because you made it. That's what matters. They sat to eat as a family, laughing, telling stories, Mama Esther making jokes about her village suitors. Then Richard reached into his pocket and pulled out a small wrapped box. What's this? Adesua asked, surprised. Open it, he said. Inside was a golden bracelet, simple but elegant. On the inside was an inscription that read, Forgiven. Favored. Forever. She read it slowly, eyes stinging. You always know the perfect words, she whispered. No, he said gently. You lived them. That's what makes them true. Later that evening, Adesua was invited to speak at the girls' shelter where she now volunteered weekly. She wore a simple long gown, held no designer purse, and stood in front of 40 young girls who looked at her with wide eyes. She told them everything. The slap, the shame, the change, the woman she used to be, and the woman she chose to become. I used to think being respected meant being feared, she said. But real respect is earned through humility, kindness, and the courage to admit when you're wrong. That slap I gave my mother-in-law, it exposed me. But it also saved me. One of the girls raised her hand. Do you still feel ashamed? Adesawa smiled softly. No. I feel grateful. Because without that moment, I wouldn't be standing here today. Back at home that night, she joined Richard in their room. He was reading, barefoot, glasses on. She climbed into bed and leaned on his chest. Do you still think about her? She asked quietly. Vanessa. Sometimes, he replied honestly. But not with anger. Just lessons. She nodded. I learned something too. That love isn't about finding someone who's never broken. It's about finding someone who's willing to be whole with you. He smiled. You sound like Mama. She laughed. She's rubbing off on me. A soft knock came at the door. Mama Esther poked her head in, holding a small plate of warm akra. Night snack, she said, grinning. They all burst into laughter. And just like that, the mansion that once echoed with pride now hummed with peace. The slap that almost destroyed everything had, in the end, revealed everything. Adesawa's story is not about perfection, it's about transformation. She slapped a woman she believed was beneath her, only to discover that woman built the very throne she wanted to sit on. That one moment of pride became the fire that refined her. And when life tested her again, with betrayal, with lies, with hidden children, she didn't fall apart. She stood taller. Because she had learned something most people never do, that real power is not in money, beauty, or status. Real power is in humility. And real love? Real love forgives, grows, and fights back, together.